All right. This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined by my co-host, as always, Brian Solomon. How's it going?
Going well, Al. Happy to be here, as always.
Yes, and returning to the show once again, Jason McVeigh, PWI contributor. How are you?
Anytime I can talk wrestling with my two favorite writers is a good day.
Yes, I like this grouping too. We always have a good time, the three of us. Maybe I don't know if I said we get along too well. I mean, sometimes that's not the best thing, so somebody please disagree with something, and I'm sure we will. Anyhow, we got a lot. We've been talking a lot of WWE the last several episodes, which stands to reason coming off of going into and then getting out of WrestleMania season. So this episode, wanted to talk some non-WWE stuff. We'll talk some AEW coming out of Double or Nothing, and now heading toward their big show of the year, All In. We've got a main event for All In. I think one that maybe a lot of people didn't expect. We'll talk a bit about that. Also going to talk a little TNA, some big changes over there, including a new world champion, which gets into some discussion of NXT as well. So sort of WWE. And we may touch on some WWE as well, in as much as that there's fairly big news about a change with WrestleMania next year. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk about why they're doing that and what that means. Get all into all of it in a second. Right now, let me tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I just got mine in the mail a couple days ago. It's a big one, and it is our Supercards issue. This is like one of the real staples. I love anything old school with the magazines. Whenever we get a chance to bring something back that's got decades of history and tradition, it's a lot of fun. So this is our Supercards issue covering, I believe, 9 different major events, including WrestleMania, 50 pages of coverage. Jason, you wrote about Unbreakable, right? TNA Unbreakable?
That's right, yeah. TNA Unbreakable. It is the 20th anniversary of the very first one, I think, with the classic Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels match. So this one also had a triple threat main event that may not have been as classic, but buy the magazine and read about it.
Yeah, what are the other shows we've got covered? I mean, again, obviously WrestleMania being the biggie, but there and a lot of it coming out of that weekend in Vegas. Kevin was there, so I got to see some of this in person. We've got AEW Dynasty, New Japan, Windy City, Riot, Unbreakable, GCW, Bloodsport, what is that, 13? Stardom, American Dream, Major League Wrestling, Battle Riot 7, Progress, Las Vegas, and the ECWA Super 8 tournament, and something else with a lot of history in our magazines. So loads of fun. Again, 50 pages of just coverage of the Supercards, loads of exclusive photos, and a lot more. Place to go is pwi-online.com. Subscribe so you don't have to worry about the next one and the one after that. And we're going to be talking PWI 500, I imagine, sometime in the next few weeks. And I got to say, a little bit of a preview. I don't know what the hell we're going to do. I feel like
it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's we had a slam dunk kind of an easy year last year. I talked about arguing. I could foresee a fair amount of arguing in the next couple of weeks.
But that's good. It keeps people guessing. I mean, there are some years where it's a foregone conclusion, even for readers, you have to imagine, right? And this is not one of those years. So, it's fun.
Yeah, WrestleMania can be tricky that way because it's not the first time that we've seen something like this where you've got a champion with who's really strong heading into WrestleMania, loses the title at WrestleMania, and now the new champion doesn't really have enough under his belt to warrant a high ranking, maybe not even a ranking at all. When I think
that's true. Cena. You got to ask the question about Cena. It'd be interesting if the reigning WWE champion, the top champion in the entire business, doesn't qualify to be ranked. We're going to have to see.
I think it's happened before, right? I mean, I don't know if it maybe happened with Lesnar in the past. But yeah, I mean, if WWE's champion is out, then and even if he's not, I don't know. Interestingly, if and I certainly don't know, nor do I really expect that it would be Cena. But if it was Cena, that'd be a record. I think that would be fourth.
4 it would be,
right?
yeah, because he's got the record at 3. He'd be breaking his own record.
Yeah. So, well, I think Rollins is tied, right? I think Rollins has got 3.
Oh,
also.
right, he just did, right, when we did the whole like former Shield guys
Yes,
trilogy
the
at the
last
top.
time we had a big
That's
argument.
right. He tied it. Yeah.
So we got that to look forward to right now. We got this to look forward to. Get it now. The Supercards issue. On the back of it, it also talks about these bundles we have. And I was looking at it and thinking, like, I don't know what to get one of these for myself. I love old wrestling magazines. And you could get these bundles. And, we've unearthed the sort of treasure trove of back issues going way back that are in perfect condition. These aren't, kind of the used things you'll find at your local comic store or something. These are never sold. So essentially been in boxes, mint condition, and some classic issues. So you get back issues, so much more. And again, subscribing is the way to go. Save a lot off the cover price. You can get both the digital edition and the print edition in a bundle. So be reading on your phone before it comes to your mailbox. Either which way, pwi-online.com is the place to go. Again, we're getting into our busy season soon with the rankings. You don't want to miss any of it. Okay, lots to talk about. Let's start with AEW. Just coming off a double or nothing. A fun show, I think, and AEW does fun shows, certainly from a long show, and that's another thing that they're good at. So I'll go around and ask, one thing I want to talk a bit about, because I think it's been kind of a fun staple. I love traditions in wrestling, and Anarchy in Arena has sort of become the double or nothing thing. And I think it's fun. I think it's something that is like sort of uniquely AEW that they have stumbled on. And I can nitpick some stuff I didn't love about it. There's always that line between, sort of chaos and hardcore wrestling, and then when you cross into just kind of gross. And there were a few times here where I thought it crossed that unnecessarily, because I don't get like a kick out of like staples, to your tongue or a mouthful of thumbtacks. It's not like a holy crap moment. It's just kind of a moment. But there were a lot of the holy crap moments that were really fun, I liked the visual of just, the 4 split screens, even though it can be hard to follow. But it's fun, just kind of this really kinetic sort of crazy atmosphere, and people on the outside and people in the rafters. And just real fun. I like the touch of having the music, kind of the soundtrack throughout. I think I might have left it on through it was better when it was there, and that was something that was really kind of innovative and novel and fun. So I dug that. So Jason, how about you? What did you think of Anarchy in the Arena?
I liked it, and it's funny because it always kind of straddles that line of, a fun, wacky wrestling brawl or a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, because it can stray very badly. But I liked the touch of the music. It was like a New Jack ECW type vibe. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Those shows are so long. It usually, with the time difference here, it takes me usually a couple of days to get through the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's such a focus on the in-ring product of AEW that things like this are actually a nice change from what they normally do. So I dug it, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing on that is, and I agree that it is a good change of pace, but they've got to be mindful not to book stuff around it, both in like, weeks and months leading up to it, that is too similar and too hardcore, and even the same night. And they did both. I mean, they had the real bloody Mark Briscoe Ricochet match earlier in the night, which I think was a huge no-no if you're doing this later in the night. And there is always this kind of like, top this sort of thing. And especially with Moxley as world champion, they've done so much like out there hardcore stuff in the last few months that I do think like they were sort of under unnecessary pressure here to kind of ramp it up. So in a vacuum, I like this a lot in the context of what AEW has been doing. There are some things I would have done different. What did you think, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I always feel that way. It's like you have to sort of figure out how to pace the show, and that's one of those things that can be chalked up to the bigger thing that we're talking about, which is, they can sometimes be long and unwieldy, and it's that classic New Japan too much of a good thing kind of thing where you're like, oh my god, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen, and it's like 20 minutes into the show, and then an hour later you're like, oh my god, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And
Yep.
an hour later, you know what I mean? And there are some people who think that people who say things like that are nuts because they'll say, like, you're complaining that there's too much good stuff. And, that's just a philosophical difference. I don't know how you could reconcile it. Some people, take that view that just give me as much as possible. And a lot of people don't. And I mean, it's as simple as that. They look for shows that are more paced and that where things are kind of where things build sometimes, where you have peaks and valleys. And I'm in that camp. And that's why even with the AEW pay-per-views, which are very often very good, it's like you can pick out the things on the show that are especially good and that make you very excited, and that then when you look at the show as a whole, it may be just kind of a big mess, but there were a lot of great things on it,
Yeah.
and that's what they do. That's kind of their style. So it's like, take it or leave it. I mean, there were some good things on the show, and there were things that didn't make sense.
Yeah, it continues to be a blind spot for Tony Khan, that if your only metric or your most important metric is just sort of match quality, work rate, I think you lose sight of the bigger context. And beyond just pacing, it leads to other issues. One of them being match order, right? Because and we've talked about this in recent shows. This was this incredible, wild match that was also really satisfying in the end. Good guys win, conquered the bad guys, all that stuff, and kind of a big exhale by all the fans, all that stuff. And then there was a 6-man match in the next slot that, like, I mean, I defy you to even. I'm not sure I could tell you everybody who was in it. I mean, the most, with all due respect to those people who worked the match and did a fine job, inconsequential. It just didn't need to be there. And I don't know, from there they went to the main event, or there might have been even another match before the main event, which was Hangman and Ospreay. But again, like this has happened so much now. When you're just sort of like concerned with star ratings, you lose sight of a lot of that. Jason, what do you think about match order here and closing with Hangman and Ospreay? Was that the right move?
Match order is always tricky. I mean, you covered all of the things there that are so true. There are too many matches, in my personal opinion, on an AEW pay-per-view. If they could whittle that down to 5, maybe 6, that's a good start. I mean, I don't know the thought process behind, let's have this wild Anarchy in the Arena multi-man match and then follow it straight up with a regular multi-man match.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
And the crowd was pretty dead for it because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fair enough. It picked back up for the main event. The crowd were into it. Hangman and Ospreay had a great match. You could have main evented with Anarchy in the Arena. Might have been the better choice, but I think to send the message that this tournament is important and winning this means something, and the guy winning this is going to go on and challenge for the world title, I think Hangman and Ospreay were in the right spot.
Yeah, I don't have a huge. I felt more strongly in the past about other ones when just a few months ago when they had Tony and Mariah May with that huge Hollywood ending match, and they stuck it in the middle of the card. I thought that was unforgivable. That was the worst of the worst. This is less so. Reasonable people could disagree. My bigger issue is just having that 6-man afterwards. Didn't need to be there at all. I get that because AEW, we've gotten away from the term pay-per-view because now everything is a PLE. these are truly pay-per-views, right? So people are paying, a fair amount of money. I don't know what they are these days, $50. So I get that the thought there is, let's give you as much bang for your buck. Longer is better, that kind of thing. I mind less on like a holiday weekend where you don't have to work on Monday this time around. But yeah, man, it can be rough when it's like hour number 6. But a lot of people don't feel it. Again, they just think they're getting more and more is good, right?
Yeah, but to the pay-per-view thing, that's something that I think needs to be addressed, because I understand the thinking, right? You're giving people, the value of their money and all this kind of stuff, but there's a bigger question here. I mean, the more pay-per-views they add, and as they creep closer and closer to the WWE model, you can't expect people to shell out that much money in 2025 when there's some people where the cost of a pay-per-view from AEW is more than their total streaming subscriptions for the entire month of whatever platforms they may have. That's not realistic, and it limits your audience in this day and age. They have got to get some type of a streaming, whether it's Max or whatever it is, type of deal with their pay-per-views. I can't even, I don't know. I don't look as closely at pay-per-view numbers for them as I do at, say, TV ratings and things like that. But I can't imagine that. I really think they're limiting their audience essentially. And I don't know if it's where their business model is based on the fact that they absolutely need this pay-per-view revenue or what, but something's got to change there. You cannot ask wrestling fans in 2025 to be spending $50, 9-10 times a year. That's a little bit crazy, I think.
Yeah, except that, there's still an argument for it if it's working. And if anything, I worry about WWE going back in that direction, especially as their business model becomes closer and closer to UFC's. Now they're all working together under TKO. You talk about $50. I think UFC's up to $80, something like that, or more. And you've got to pay the monthly subscription for ESPN Plus, and people will buy it still, in pretty big numbers. So I've always heard it. I don't know numbers either, but that AEW pay-per-views actually do pretty well for them.
It's scary when you think about it, because on the one hand, I think the one thing that's holding them back in terms of WWE and TKO is this idea of, a consumer revolt, where you've had 8 years now, has it been, or 10 years or something, of doing it this way, and then you're going to be like, well, we're going to go back to the way it was, except it's going to cost way more.
Yeah.
But if you get these lunatics that are willing to mortgage their entire life every single month to go to these pay-per-views and things, maybe they will do it. If you get people that are just going, I'm just going to, charge myself into oblivion to pay $30,000 to get into a pay-per-view, well, then what's to stop them from paying $50, $100 just to watch a pay-per-view at home? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will.
Yeah, I mean, this gets to something else that, I thought might come up when we talk about the news of WrestleMania moving or not moving, for that matter, staying where it is for another year in Vegas. And that's this kind of like push and pull between what is the financially smart thing to do from a bottom line perspective, and what is sort of the fan friendly thing to do. And the reality is that the financial incentive is going to win out every time. And I brought up here, it's why most people can't go to a UFC show, because the buy-in price at the very bottom for the worst seats in the house are $400 or something like that. And we're seeing at least WWE move closer and closer to that model where, there aren't. I say that I got tickets to SummerSlam in MetLife, and I was surprised that they weren't all that bad. I was able to buy for 2 nights around $100, so about $50 a night for crap seats, but you're in the building. So I'm surprised that it was still that affordable. But all these things, it's like, this goes with everything, right? Like the what is something worth? It's worth what people are willing to pay for it, right? So
yes.
if and that's why you see concert tickets just obscene prices now, because you keep on jacking it up higher and higher, and you get to that point, you know, and this, you could do this when wrestling is hot, right? So push it as much as you can while wrestling is hot, because the day's going to come that you're not able to. Jason, a separate on, well, you know, kind of related as far as AEW, it's worth bringing this up. Is AEW getting hot again? You know, that's something that's kind of been talked about, and I guess, you know, the numbers are kind of moving in the right direction, and they've seen a little bit of an increase. And I think there's just kind of a feel that, you know, they might have hit their bottom and pulled the nose back up. I don't know how much of it is just seasonal, and that we are moving into All In now and kind of their big show of the year. But do you have a sense that there's been a change in the trajectory?
Yes and no, I guess. I think they're better than where they were. I think there was a period there last year where things really seemed to be bottoming out, and it didn't look good on screen or everything you heard of it. I think it's gone upward. I think some of their creative is improving, which is helping. There's a few stories going on there, and you know, it ties into the Hangman and Ospreay thing. And I think it's ironic that for a company that's always talked about as, oh, it's their work rate, it's their matches, stories don't really matter, characters don't really matter. It's all about the work rate. The Hangman Adam Page winning this tournament and now going for the world title, it's a story that's been going for several years now. It's actually a story that AEW seems to have taken a bit of care and attention with, and it's paying off for them. I think people are invested and people are looking forward to that. So I think things like that are helping them. Mercedes Moné, Tony Storm, people like that. So I think it is trending a little more positively. Whether or not that can be sustained and what it means long term, I don't know.
Yeah. On the Hangman thing, you know, since they signed Ospreay a couple years ago, I think the expectation has been for all the all-ins, because you know, Ospreay came in, I think, the first year that they ran Wembley, and every year the expectation is like, well, this is where they're gonna, you know, there's gonna be the coronation to this year's All In, and they didn't do the first year, they didn't do the second year, and they're not doing it this year, you know, apparently. That said, you know, certainly there are a lot of people who are fine with it. Maybe even the majority of fans, as you touched on, I think are excited about the prospect of maybe Hangman being that guy. You know, I'm still on the fence about the guy. Brian, what do you think about the move of going in the direction of Hangman and still taking a kind of a wait and see approach before making Ospreay the guy?
Well, I think that Hangman, I mean, I've always liked him. I've always thought that he has a lot of a big upside, a lot of potential. And anything that goes wrong with him, I always feel like is more the company's fault than his fault. I think he's like a diamond in the rough, to be honest with you. But one thing I think they have to be careful of, speaking of Ospreay and speaking of Hangman, whether they are getting hot or not, I don't think you want to have, you know, there was a great opening segment they had on Dynamite with Swerve and Ospreay and Hangman, where they had Ospreay say something like, people are starting to care about us again, something like that. You don't want to say that. I mean, because it just reeks of desperation. I mean, yeah, that may be true, but that's not what you should be having guys saying on television, because then the average fan is going, wait a minute, people didn't care about AEW? What? The average fan who didn't know that or didn't perceive that? You know, you don't want to foster that perception. It's a loser mindset. I hate to say that. And you don't want to put that out there publicly. So just make it happen instead of addressing it. You know, that's more of the thing to do, that to appear to be a top company, a major company. So, you know, that kind of struck me as odd, but I don't know if it's even true or not, or if it's just a perception or what, or if it's one of those whisper campaign things where if you say it enough, it starts to feel like it, you know, it's really happening. I don't know. But, you know, either way, I think, you know, people like Ospreay and Strickland and Page, that's who you should have at the top. I mean, that's definitely a step in the right direction. People like that that's what you need to be doing. And that, so maybe there's some truth to it. I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Any reason to believe, Jason, that AEW's fortunes change much with Hangman as the champion and kind of the guy? I mean, they did it before, right? I mean, this wouldn't be his first title reign. Granted, it was years ago, and he's changed a lot, and you could argue if he's more over now than he was there. But you see it in WWE, and it's always been true over time that what gets a wrestling company hot is that guy, right? The right attraction at the top, whether it was Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or John Cena or Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes now, or whoever, or the NWO in WCW and whatever. You need that guy. I think there's been a thought that because Will Ospreay has this reputation as maybe the best wrestler in the world, that once you got him, well, that's your guy, and they're going in a different direction. Could Page be that guy?
I don't know if he is. I think it is the right time for him to win the title. I think at this point, anything that gets the belt off Jon Moxley,
it's the right time for Moxley to lose the title.
Yeah. It's long overdue, and put the Death Riders thing to bed. Even AEW fans, you don't hear a lot of defense. AEW fans are very quick to defend a lot of good things that are happening in the company. Very rarely can they defend the Moxley and the Death Rider stuff. It's just been awful. I don't know if there's any better way to say it. So in terms of that, it is absolutely the right time to put the belt on Hangman. Whether or not he's the guy to push through and take them to another level, I don't think so. I'm a huge fan. I really am. I really like him, and I want him to have a good run with this. And as I said, they've built this for a few years now, this story of him getting back to the world title. I think it's only a matter of time before maybe Swerve takes it back off him again.
Yeah.
And then maybe Ospreay comes after that. I don't know. It's one of the problems with AEW that there are too many guys who could all be wearing the belt, which is a nice problem to have. But the problem is you have spent so much time on Jon Moxley and Adam Copeland and guys who really shouldn't have been up there. As Brian said, the guys who are in the mix now are the guys who should be. So we'll see going forward, but I don't think Hangman will make a huge difference that way.
Yeah, and I'm not even convinced that he wins it. I mean, you would think he does. Is he a Texan?
No, he's from Virginia, maybe.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's one thing I thought, the whole cowboy thing. You're in Dallas. Which
I think they'll lean into. They'll have some grand entrance with him on a horse and everything else.
If he doesn't get it, I mean, that really is, boy. I feel like this is almost like a last chance to try to pull themselves out of this Death Riders death spiral. I mean, it would be absolutely mind-boggling. They've gone so far past the point of, this is where they should have gotten the belt off Moxley. Like, they are so far past that this almost feels like it's one of those things where it's like any shred of hope that you've given the fans. If you don't deliver on this one, I don't know what comes after that. It almost feels like like a Sheik thing, like in the book that I wrote, where it's like at a certain point, if he doesn't lose to somebody, people just give up. They just are like, all right, I give up. I'm not gonna hold out hope anymore. I give up.
I wonder if they think they're doing what WWE was doing with Roman a couple of years ago.
I think they do think that. Yeah, no, I do think they think that.
Which makes me worried, because
it's not the same.
That means another year of
Yeah, because it's like, well, it also feels like an NWO thing, like where it just went on and on and on, even though the belt would be lost here and there, and you had your great moments and Luger and Goldberg and all that stuff, but it still was the NWO on top endlessly, and that did permanent damage to that company.
Yeah, and the difference with Roman, and we've even questioned whether that was the right move, but Roman was over, right? So when they decided not to put the title on Cody that first year and stretch it out for another year, they knew the title was in the hands of a really over big star. And they did that. That's not, and it's no disrespect to Moxley. It's just that the character, it's not hot right now. So I get like the long game, and that what makes me worry is that if the plan eventually still is Will Ospreay, are they thinking it's Will Ospreay at next year's All In? And I just. The reality is that their business is, even if that they have a long-term plan, their business is not strong enough to stretch this out. They just need to do something different right now, even if it's not the perfect choice. And it's an argument for putting the title on Page, even if he isn't the guy who's going to like turn your whole business around. It's just not Moxley. It's something fresh, and it just gets things moving up near the top. And I just love to see something different from Moxley too, because the truth is, I almost feel bad like crapping on Moxley so much because he's terrific. I mean, we know that he's a great worker. It just speaks to like bad casting, and it's just sometimes. Wrestlers could be kind of their own worst enemy in that they obsess about like a certain role or a certain character, even if it's not working, and this isn't working for him. So,
and here's the difference too. I mean, it's obvious, but I mean, a major difference between this and a Roman Reigns situation was they were doing the opposite thing, and I can pretty much guarantee that when Roman Reigns won that title originally in 2020. They weren't sitting there going, we're going to make this a really long title reign. He's going to hold it forever and beat everybody. And they were not thinking that. It was more a thing of, this is really working. Wow. This is getting a lot of heat. He's getting over. It's getting other people over. Let's keep this going. You know what I mean? It was a thought process derived from that. Whereas what they're doing is they're trying to force it. They're just saying, people are saying, this is not working. This is a disaster. It's hurting everyone, including Moxley, including the title and everything. And they're just going, no, let's just push through it and keep going and make it like, what they were doing over there. And it's just as wrong-headed as you could get, because that's not what they set out to do in WWE.
Yeah. Going back briefly to the match order question, looking ahead to All In, again, the assumption is that this headline's All In, but now they've got what is arguably a bigger match in Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné, and they have the fact that they still haven't headlined a pay-per-view with women, and I think now, they need some goodwill there, right? So headlining your biggest show of the year with your, what I think is arguably the match between your two biggest stars,
I would say so.
Maybe makes sense. So do we think that should be the main event of All In?
Oh boy. I mean, over the AEW world title, I don't know. That's a tough call. That's a very tough
some would say they're both world titles, right? I mean,
right. No, you're right. And did you notice how Hangman Page specifically said, my goal is the men's world title? I can't ever remember somebody a wrestler putting it that way before in a promo. That's a big deal. So maybe that's sort of a tip of the hand of that they are going to try to do that and have the women's world title be the headline match.
And in as much as we say all the time, a title is only as prestigious as the person who wears it. You could certainly make the argument that the women's title is much more prestigious than the men's title right now because it's around the waist of the biggest star in the company.
It's all about perception too. Here's the thing. I mean, they're both, promoted as world titles, and one is held by men and one is held by women. But there's no question. I mean, similar to in WWE, but there's no question that, and especially in AEW, they have not created the perception to fans that those two titles are equal titles. I mean, most certainly not. I mean, a lot of work has to be done, and maybe that's part of what helps them do it. Is if they want to do that,
they've got to take themselves out of a hole a little bit now that they've created by sort of disrespecting the women for so long. And if you want to send the message that no, we value our women's division, how else to do it than have them headline your biggest show of the year?
Yeah, I think it would be well received by fans. I have to say that's one thing. I think absolutely, especially by their fans, that would be very well received if they did that.
Yeah, yeah. Jason, do you put the world title on Mercedes?
I think absolutely Mercedes is
Yeah,
walking out with the world title, no question. Which is the very reason I don't think it will go on last, because
because
I
they
think
have a downer. Yeah,
they'll have because she's a heel, and I think they'll want to have that happy moment where Hangman wins the belt in front of everybody, unless Moxley retains the title, and then the women's match is
yeah.
somewhere in the middle of the card, and then the whole thing's a disaster.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I mean, like they put the women in the middle and they close it
It's
with
not beyond
Moxley
that.
winning.
It's not.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, there'd be riots. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of the prestige of titles, wanted to talk a little bit about the TNA title, and really interesting what TNA has been doing as of late. It's like on one hand, they've got Joe Hendry, who I think is a legit breakout star, right? I mean, the first sort of like legit TNA breakout star they've had in I don't know how long, but he's sort of homegrown their guy and has become a big star. It coincides with this working relationship with WWE, which could be and should be really beneficial. But the flip side of that is that we've now seen Henry do a 3-minute job to Randy Orton at WrestleMania, and I get it. He got to work at WrestleMania in a big spot, so don't feel sorry for him. And now lose the title to essentially a WWE developmental guy, and I know it's more than that. Trick Williams is a big star in NXT, and it's not that he's not ready for prime time, but he's slotted there now. But it does send kind of a message of your world title is or your world champion is somebody who is squash fodder for Randy Orton and can be beaten by an NXT guy. So Jason, what do you think about this whole arrangement with WWE and TNA? Is it just sort of the reality is like, yeah, TNA is well under even NXT, and they should be happy just for the exposure?
I think that's it. And as a long-time TNA fan who has watched from the very first show, it pains me to say that TNA is on par with NXT these days, and maybe below par. But I think they are leaning into this. I think TNA have long ago abandoned any kind of ambition to be, we're going to be the number 2 company. Even I think they have settled into this almost ECW type role where, okay, we're going to buddy up to the industry leader and we're going to try and use it to our benefit as much as we can. And to their credit, it's working. I think since this relationship started, TNA has made some changes to make themselves, I think, a little bit more corporate, which is benefiting them from a business standpoint. I think their houses are packed, which has not happened in a long time. So it's hard to say that the WWE relationship hasn't helped with that. Now, in terms of perceiving it as our guys are big stars and we can put them up against anybody, I think that is bore out that that's not the case. The Randy Orton, Joe Hendry thing at WrestleMania didn't bother me that much. It was what it was. Maybe bothers me a little bit more, and it's nothing against Trick Williams because Trick is really talented and I really like him. But they've invested so much into Joe Hendry that I know you guys in this podcast have always said that, well, Joe Hendry should have won the belt at Bound for Glory last year. Why didn't they? And I was always like, oh, it's okay. It makes the rematch more special when he won it in January. I thought, okay, this is us for a year. Here we are 4 or 5 months later, and he's lost the belt to a WWE guy.
Yeah.
That kind of gets me a little bit more than anything. It's like, okay. And it's almost like TNA saying, oh, yeah, you can have your way with our guys as much as you want to.
Yeah. And I know the thought is WWE's got their eye on Joe Hendry. It's a matter of time before he goes over there. But being treated like this, yeah, maybe he goes over there, but is he, Tozawa or something like that? I mean, the way he's treated doesn't give you any sense that they see him as a future top guy. And maybe they don't need to. Maybe, I don't know that I see him as a future top guy. But it is this sort of like interesting thing where as you touched on, there's all kinds of evidence that this working relationship has been really beneficial to TNA, but it's also a little kind of humbling, right? I mean, they're really kind of putting themselves in a certain spot. They're coming to the UBS Arena near me, 10 minutes from my house, for what might be their from a live event perspective, their biggest show ever. UBS Arena is 17,000 seat new arena in basically metropolitan New York City area for Slammiversary. And when they announced it last year, I thought, how are they possible? I mean, like, for me to see TNA, they'll run maybe like the Westchester County Center or something like that, where it's 1,500 fans, something like that. This is 10 times that size. When they announced it, I assumed there'd have to be some WWE involvement. It's the only way they're going to get, they're going to pack that building. And it does seem like that's the route they're going. But, Brian, is this all worth it for TNA?
Well, first of all, I've had a lot of time to think about that Hendry and Orton thing at Mania, and I think it's a disingenuous thing that a lot of people are saying that, oh well, if you're on WrestleMania, how are you being buried? Ask SD Jones that, ask Adam Bomb that, if that's possible. It most certainly is possible to be on WrestleMania and be buried, because it's all about presentation. He was absolutely treated like a second-rate figure and somebody who was being fed to Randy Orton. And, if that's the case, and some people are saying, well, how else would you expect the TNA World Champion to be treated at WrestleMania? And that's all well and good, but at least call it for what it is. That was not a rub at all. That was them saying, your world champion is really a much lesser world champion. And yeah, it is. But do we want to be, does it benefit TNA to have that emphasized in that way? No, I don't think it does. There's better ways to do it. I don't mind so much Trick Williams winning the TNA title and this idea of this once unthinkable thing of a WWE wrestler, and yes, NXT wrestlers are WWE wrestlers. I mean, that's what they are. Winning a TNA title, a TNA world title even, is unheard of. However, I think what would need to happen at some point, though, is for a TNA wrestler to win an NXT title. Do you know what I mean? Like, that needs to happen in order for it to appear to be a partnership and not just TNA is now our new farm system, which I don't know if it benefits TNA to have that perception, because that just seems to be like we're ramping up to buying this company, essentially. There needs to be more of a give and take. There has been a little bit of give and take, obviously, with all the invasions, the TNA invasions happening, but they need to kind of work more towards making it feel like it's equal parties, because otherwise you're talking more like what happened with the so-called WCW invasion. That wasn't even really an invasion because they owned it already. So they have to be very careful. I don't have as much of a problem, like I said, with the Trick Williams thing, but there needs to be another shoe that drops at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it since this has started, we've seen TNA send top acts to WWE to get, I don't even want to say buried, because I mean they get they'll put them in a big match and they'll give a good fight, but they'll lose, right? So to lose to WWE stars, and not even top stars, I mean necessarily, but what we've seen most is them put in NXT matches, and more often than not come up short challenging for world titles, and then WWE sends
Robert Stone,
not prominent NXT developmental wrestlers to TNA for seasoning, but they're not sending their big stars over to TNA shows. I'm guessing we might get Trick Williams at Slammiversary, and that's fine. That's something, but like, you're not getting Cody Rhodes at Slammiversary or anything like that. But again, like I get that there's part of this discussion that's just like, well, let's come back to earth, and TNA is what it is, and WWE is what it is, and WWE has the cards here, and they call the shots. And to some extent, be grateful that WWE is even giving you the time of day and giving you a platform on their television to be grateful that Joe, even if we want to call it a burial of Joe Henry, it was at WrestleMania, right? So, be happy that we're even acknowledging you, that we're mentioning the letters TNA on our product. And I wonder if there's, similar to ECW, if there's a little subsidizing going on, if there's a little WWE money flowing TNA's way.
That's been my assumption all along through this, that there has to be. I mean, that has to be happening as part of this deal, that they're kind of subsidizing them, which I think that was happening with ECW back in the day, which was kept very quiet, right? That they were propping them up a little bit with money. I tend to think they are. I tend to think that TNA is a bit of a pawn in all this, in WWE's kind of like war with AEW, even if they don't want to admit that it's a war. It's almost like they are trying to prop up TNA. I know we laughed off the idea about them being as a number 2 company. I think they're trying to prop them up and help them become the number 2 company, and help them to help facilitate AEW being pushed down into the number 3 position, which I have to say, I think the only thing preventing that from happening right now is that they have TNA has a crappy cable distribution thing going on with this Access TV, which the Anthem owns. So good luck with that. I think if TNA had a better cable presence, they absolutely would be very in very prime position to become the number 2 wrestling company over AEW.
But it's the chicken and the egg, right? I mean,
yes.
They need bigger stars, bigger audience to warrant a bigger TV deal, right? And if overnight you put the TNA show as it is right now, gave it 2 hours on Thursday nights on the USA Network, I don't know that that makes any sense. I mean, they don't have recognizable names, they don't have the production value. AEW, for all its flaws, is a real major league looking product, right? I mean, even now that they've scaled down some and they're not running every week the biggest arenas, it looks, AEW looks much closer to WWE programming than TNA does.
But here's the thing, I think and Jason, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think the WWE connection could help them in that regard, because the fact is, right now, as far as like eyeballs and things, NXT is pulling ahead of AEW in terms of how many people watch it every week, the visibility that it has. And NXT doesn't have like some huge roster of mainstream level stars. They don't. I mean, in the making, yes, they do, potential, but they're doing it without that. And if anything, TNA may have more people with wrestling fan recognition than NXT has. You know what I mean?
They get fired from WWE and
right. But they've got Dolph Ziggler there. They've got people like that there. I mean, if put in the right position, they absolutely could come across as the second company down from WWE and NXT. I think so.
Yeah.
I think what you touched on there, Brian, is a key thing. I don't know if I would go so far to say that WWE are subsidizing TNA, but I absolutely believe that WWE are helping TNA to maybe find a good TV deal, because, as you say, I think it's in WWE's best interest to have TNA on a good network where they can hurt AEW. I think, like, there's been rumors recently that some backstage rules and policies have been introduced in TNA, and one of them apparently is we need to tone down how much blood is on TV. Yes. I think a lot of people believe that is advice coming from WWE. Okay, look, you need to do this. It'll help you land a better TV deal. I think that's actively happening, and rumors that I'm hearing is they're really looking for something there. TNA's production values have increased greatly. As someone who watches every week for my sins, they have really improved in the past 6 months. The shows look better. Impact on a weekly basis looks better. And I still agree that that's WWE playing some part in maybe giving a little bit of direction to make this look more like a first-rate product.
Yeah. playing this out, right, where this eventually goes. And this is another thing that makes me a little uneasy about this alliance. And it reminds me of the conversation we had with Alfonso in the last episode about the AAA purchase is, sure, maybe they help them get on television, a better television network, and maybe they lend them some talent, and maybe they lend them some production. Maybe they even buy them, and then maybe they start sending some stars over there. And at some point, it's just not TNA anymore, right? It's just WWE, and because of that, maybe it does better. But how long is it before you just sort of like close the doors on the thing? I mean, that's what the WCW purchase is, and it's why. And I get from TNA's perspective why you would want this relationship, but I do think that they need to tread a little carefully going forward, because if it ever became an outright sale, and I certainly understand why WWE would want it, if only for the library, right? I mean, so many of their top stars have, you've got all the old Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Sting stuff. So there's tons of content you would want, but this almost never ends well. These working relationships between WWE and other promotions never end well.
And the reference I always use is Kevin Bacon in Animal House. It's always, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Yeah.
When he's being paddled, it's every wrestling company that has worked with WWE in some capacity. It's always, just do what you want to us. We're happy to be associated. So I hope this and the AAA one are both different, but time will tell.
Yeah. And you get it. I mean, especially when WWE is as hot as it is right now, if you could have any little piece of that, you jump at it if you're a wrestling promoter. But it is like buyer beware, and especially sort of looking ahead. On the topic of, I'm trying to think of anything else I want to talk about TNA, WWE. No, less so. I touched on WrestleMania moving. Wanted to get your thoughts on it, why they're doing it, and what it says about where WWE is going forward. I was kind of bummed to hear it because I like going to WrestleMania each year. I don't tend to go back to Vegas a second year in a row. And, the one thing about this year's WrestleMania was that it was, prohibitively expensive. And I imagine that's why they're doing it. And I don't mean just the show, but and it is something that made Vegas so inviting to them, is that there's so much there and so many venues to do so many different things that, where WrestleMania went from being a one-night show to a two-night show to Hall of Fame and SmackDown and NXT and all that. Now there were several events every night. There were after parties. There was a comedy roast. There was, all this stuff. I could see why they want to go back there. But it also, again, I don't know if it's the most fan-friendly thing in the world. I think you lose, I don't know what it's worth, but I like WrestleMania moving from city to city every year. And I like the idea of cities kind of bidding on it and it being a big deal that WrestleMania is coming to your city. And there's also just kind of the fun of branding it with a different city every year. So, I mean, I think back to WrestleMania 4 and 5 and how just monotonous it was that, 5 looked just like 4 because they stayed in the same building. And I worry about that a little bit next year. Brian, does it make sense what they're doing?
Well, I think if you're going to pick a city to run it on a yearly basis, Vegas is a good idea because it's kind of like a destination city that people travel to. You can't, if you're going to like do it every year in Indianapolis, that might be a problem, right? But the thing about it is what they're going to lose, though, is the local pull, which I have to imagine is a significant number of people who go to WrestleMania, or they're going because it's close, right? So if you're doing it in one place every year, even a place like Vegas, you're going to burn out that local pull. Anybody in the nearby vicinity is going to Vegas, Nevada, Arizona, whatever. They're going to be like, well, I'm not going again. You know what I mean? They're going to start to lose. I think that's going to hurt in the long run because it's just, I mean, even the Super Bowl doesn't do that. I mean, they don't have it in the home field of whatever team is in it because they book it way out in advance. but they move it around. WrestleMania has always been the same kind of thing. So I think it might be good for a few years maybe, but I think that's going to wear off. But then again, they may say, hey, we'll do it here for a few years. Then they'll have it in New York for a few years. Then we'll have it in LA for a few years. I mean, who knows what their long-term plans are with something like that.
And the Indianapolis one you mentioned it, but they actually, I think, do have to go to Indianapolis sometime in the next few years. They made some deal with them.
Well, one thing I got to say, which I think has to be said with this whole New Orleans thing, and this is, to me, if I didn't sense that there was major behind the scenes power struggles going on here with Rock versus, Triple H or versus whoever else, this clinches it for me. I mean, the way I'm perceiving it is like New Orleans was something that The Rock wanted for whatever reason, or something he was pushing for. And maybe there were people in the company that didn't want that, and those people won. Whether it's real or not, I mean, that's what it gives me the sense of, that there's not this unity of message, let's say, from the Vince McMahon days. There's people pulling on either side, and there's like a tug of war going on. It feels like that you didn't get the sense of before.
Yeah. And there's a fair amount of this going on because, people forget that WrestleMania last year or this year was also sort of moved. The original, I mean,
yes,
it was reported widely that it was supposed to be Minnesota, I think. And then
Minneapolis.
the 11th hour, they moved it to Vegas. Evolution, the second Evolution women's pay-per-view was tentatively set for Connecticut, right? On your parts, Mohegan Sun. And that's out. And I think they're doing it in Atlanta, I think. So there's a lot of it now that and I don't know what it says. I mean, I think what it says is that there is a new corporate sort of structure over there where they're still figuring this out, and they're looking at live events different than they ever have before. Some of that is that there's just a lot fewer house shows now. I mean, like,
there's none. There hasn't been
the house show. There
hasn't been a domestic house show in 2025 yet.
That's crazy.
So what they've done is, without making a big deal about it, or it was never a big announcement or a big changing of the guard or anything, they have killed house shows. House shows are over. They're done. I
mean, that's it. Jason might end up getting to see more WWE than we do because, I mean, the infatuation now is going international. But it's a good point. I mean, quietly, we might have seen like the death of WWE house shows, and that also affects. We were just talking earlier about the PWI 500 activity, right? Like one of the things that sort of sealed it for Cody last year and the last couple of years that why he did so well was that he was so active, right? I mean, and working so often. Now, even a wrestler who is making all the TVs and PLEs isn't going to work that much. It's great for the wrestlers, right? I mean, in that what I hear is the money is better than that's ever been before in WWE, and the schedule is a lot lighter.
But I think it's going to hurt the quality, because one of the things that WWE always had over everyone else, and we've talked about it here before, I think, is just how polished everyone is and how it's the absolute state of the art professionally in terms of like what wrestling performance is, because they're doing things that no other company's doing. And Cody Rhodes and other people talked about how in AEW, they were always getting the sense that everybody's just getting worse and worse over time because they're not working enough. They're not getting in enough hours. They don't even have a performance center or anything like that. And, I'm worried that in the long term, it's going to hurt the in-ring product of WWE. It's going to make people more injury prone and things like that. It's going to make them just like any other company in that regard, to just be working a few times a month. And if that, because not everybody's guaranteed to work every TV, right? That there's only so many people and there's only so much airtime. There's so much that's lost with that. In fact, I know there's even been talk of whether or not the big Madison Square Garden Christmas week show is going to happen. That's like their biggest house show of the year. I think it's more likely than not that it is going to happen. But if it does, it might wind up being the only American house show of the year, which is insane when you think they used to do like about 30 house shows a month, right?
Yeah.
At one time at their height. Probably more than that, actually, if they were doing more than one a day at a certain point. It's wild. It's wild to think. I mean, you don't want to go back to that. That was destroying these guys, but there's got to be some kind of happy medium in there. I mean, maybe they don't care. Like you said, if they're making better money, then why are they going to care? But, their performances might suffer.
I saw something recently in this, I guess, probably early 90s or late 80s, where WWE ran 6 house shows in one day.
I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
Had, their A, B, and C team, and they each did a matinee in one city and then an evening show in another one. So 6 house shows in one day. Yeah. They might not do 6 house shows this year.
Well, that was their whole business. The house shows was their whole business, right? That's how they were infiltrating and taking over everything and making all the money. I've heard of 3 happening fairly often. I've even seen a couple of occasions where it was 4. I've never heard of 6. That's insane. I don't even know how you even logistically, how do you even have the agents to send to all those shows and the manpower to run the shows? That boggles the mind.
Yeah. Jason, again, selfishly, are you happy that maybe it's, because part of the strategy is, again, going international, and they've said as much that the big tentpole PLEs will be domestic and the others will be international. They seem to have gotten away from that somewhat, because we just had Backlash in St. Louis and Money in the Bank is in LA. But international seems to still be a place where they're trying to grow.
I'd be happier about it if the house show tickets here were a little bit cheaper.
That's like it, right? I mean, like for everybody becomes a lot more expensive.
Yeah, the house show tickets here are now. I remember the first WWE house show I went to here was in 2002, and I think it was something like £40 for a ticket. It's now maybe £140 for a ticket, for the same kind of ticket in the same, the back of the arena. So yes, delighted that they're still coming here to do those kind of things, but not about the price. And just touching back on the Las Vegas thing, and the lack of house shows now, a part of me wonders, is this let's base this a little bit more on the UFC business model.
Mm-hmm.
There's no house shows in MMA, and so part of me wonders as well, with WrestleMania going back to Las Vegas for a second time, is this a bit of a move towards, UFC's based in Las Vegas. Could we kind of combine a lot of this kind of stuff and move the office out there someday? Now, I know they have that new, beautiful office building in Stamford, but it's not without question. I think that maybe someday they look at that let's just combine all of these under one roof.
Yeah, I do think some of it, whether it's UFC or just sort of, and I get it, and I think there's a benefit to looking at it differently. And I do think, as much as I love house shows, I understand why TKO and all those executives might come in with a fresh set of eyes and look at it and think like, well, this doesn't really make sense. Why are we having the wrestlers on this grind, several times a week for essentially chump change in some of these mid-size arenas, and we're WWE. I mean, let's stop thinking of us like kind of the ice capades or monster trucks, and let's start thinking about us like the Beyonce concert. We're a huge deal, and I get it, and I think there's a lot of good that comes out of it, and these wrestlers are able to I heard Chris Jericho talk about this, that it's not that unusual now. It used to be that like the top salary for the top guys, even during big business periods in that not that far in the past, you were talking like $1 million, right, or something like that. And I'm sure like the John Cena's of the world were making more than that. But it sounds like there's a lot of guys now making 8 figures and working a lot less, and that's great. It's great for them, less so for the fans, I guess, who don't get to see them as much.
Right, because the old house show model, it came from the idea of looking at it as, like you said, ice capades or Ringling Brothers Circus or monster trucks. It's this live touring attraction of entertainment that comes to your town. and it comes from a time when there were other revenue streams, but there was nothing that was eclipsing it in the way that what we see today is eclipsing it. I mean, even in the days of pay-per-views, it wasn't what you see now with the TV rights fees and things like that, and all that kind of big money coming in. And, as far as something to be a revenue source, it is very, very outdated and outmoded. And that's why people started looking at it for its other benefits, like I said. But, if it's a loss leader, then a corporate giant like Endeavor is not going to want to keep it going. It just doesn't make sense for their bottom line.
Yeah, and kind of going full circle, you talked about one of the negative consequences of this change is losing that experience of being on the road all the time. Maybe that's where the NXTs of the world, even the TNAs of the world, and now they've got Evolve and they've got the WWE ID system. That's where they're looking to fill that gap is get that experience somewhere else. So by the time you make it up to the main show, you've got that seasoning. And I know that, I guess your point is that even the top guys need to work regularly. It's not like once you learn it, you've got it, you'll never lose it.
Yeah, look at John Cena. Do you want them to turn into John Cena?
Sure, yeah.
That's why Randy Orton is Randy Orton and John Cena is John Cena. They're almost the same age. They started almost the same time. They couldn't possibly be more different in their appearance and in how they work. And it's because Orton's out there busting his ass constantly and Cena's not.
Yeah. You lose that muscle memory and the calluses that you build up. So it's a good point. All right, guys. Thanks. It was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground. Glad to have done it. Jason, anything you want to talk about before we head out? Anything you're working on for the next magazine?
Just working on, got a few things coming up, which looking at the Action Dean show, which might make an appearance in a future PWI. But other than that, please check out the PWI-online.com. You could subscribe to the PWI weekly newsletter there. You can go on, you can check out our weekly ratings, which I play a part in updating every week. So lots to follow for PWI.
Yes. And Brian, what have we got going on?
Well, on the book front, Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. I'm in the midst of the last read through of the text to give it its final approval before it goes to press. The one thing I'm waiting for is a cover. And once I have that, I'm going to really be getting it out there. And, I'm excited to have people check it out. We don't have a cover yet, but that's very soon. The other thing I wanted to mention with my own podcast, Shut Up and Wrestle, is I just started a new series on there. So I just want to briefly plug it. It's called the NWA World Champions Series, where I do a different episode with a different guest, focusing on one of the major kind of touring NWA world champions from the classic period of the title, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, basically when it was the number one title and prize in the sport of wrestling. And we just put out our first episode on kind of an obscure figure, Orville Brown, who was the first NWA world heavyweight champion. And I've got somebody that actually is a part of Billy Corgan's NWA to come on and talk about that. So that's the first episode. Is going to be 13 episodes in the series, but of course, the Shut Up and Wrestle is still a weekly podcast, and you can get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Because you got all this free time to.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, it's still the podcast. It's not. I didn't add anything new. It's just different. It's a series within the weekly podcast. I'm not adding episodes that I wouldn't have ordinarily done. I'm not crazy now.
The hardest working man in pro wrestling. What did you think of the Sheik Dark Side of the Dark Side of the Ring?
Well, I think it could have used more of me on there, but other than that, no, I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They like to have eyewitness people who were there, or people who are major figures in the business, like a Jim Cornette or even Dave Meltzer, who, even though he's not a participant, he's covering a lot of these stories in real time. I get that. They had a great author on there, Jim Friedman, who wrote a book about the Sheik back in the day. But the difference is he knew the Sheik personally, right?
Yeah.
So I understand that. I thought it was very fair. I thought it was very well done. If anything, they went pretty easy on him. I thought, even in terms of my book was overall, I thought a very positive and celebratory look, but it did get into more of the darker side than even I thought this episode did. It was unusual, I thought, for this show, Dark Side of the Ring, to shy away from certain things that are covered in depth in many other Dark Side episodes, even when you have involvement of the person's family. So, but I mean, in that sense, I guess that people who loved the Sheik and his family, his friends, could not have been happier with an episode like this. Right. I thought it handled him very respectfully, and gave fans an idea, maybe who weren't as clear on him and his legacy of who he was and what his importance was to the business. So I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. It does feel like the whole series, I don't want to say running out of the gas, but you know,
I think it's been a good season. I enjoyed this.
Which of you enjoyed? I just watched the Muhammad Hassan one. It's fine. I mean, like, I don't know if it broke a whole lot of ground.
That was an interesting one for me because I was there while all that was going on.
Oh,
I don't know if there's ever been one yet that's been like that. I'm trying to think, but so it was kind of surreal. The Daphne one was just crushing. That was very, very hard to watch. I liked the Eddie Gilbert one. I thought that was well done.
Billy Jack Haynes was the other one.
Oh God, yeah. See, that was fascinating because even though he's this historical figure, it's tied into things that are happening right now. And man, that was one of the most insane episodes. I mean, I don't even know. I can't even wrap my head around him as a person, what his whole thing is. It's just so bizarre and surreal. There was another one that I really liked. Oh, the Vader one I thought was good. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's been a solid season. The problem is, here's the thing, like the most talked about kind of stories from wrestling lore were done right out of the gate.
The first couple seasons.
So like, you know, Bruiser Brody, Owen Hart, Benoit, Jimmy Snuka, like a lot of the things that people have talked about since forever have been done. So then it sort of becomes this thing where it starts to feel like, okay, here's another episode on a guy who crashed and burned because of drugs and bad decisions in wrestling. Here's another guy who crashed and burned because of the same thing. He did drugs and did a lot of stupid things. And, you know, there can be a repetition factor in there for sure. But for that reason, I think something like what's one they just did that was very outside the box, and it wasn't like that. They did one on last season about Bash at the Beach, at WCW Bash at the Beach, which was very different. And you know what was great from this season? The Mankind versus Undertaker Hell in a Cell. That was kind of a more outside the box, where it felt more in the vein of like something like what they did on the Montreal Screwjob,
right? Yeah,
where it's not just my God, somebody self-destructing on drugs. So they may need to think a little more outside the box for things like that.
Yeah. Still a fun watch. Hope it sticks around. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for doing this, and we will be back soon.